Imagine, imagine spending your entire professional life teaching the really rigid empirical rules of political science.
Right, the cold, hard mechanics of government.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You spend your days analyzing voting patterns, power structures, things like that.
Yeah.
You live in a quiet, snowy suburb in Canada,
Sounds pretty grounded.
very grounded, and then secretly, in your private hours, you write these devastating, mystical Urdu poems.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, poems about ancient desert tragedies and divine love. I mean, today's source material is just the ultimate documentation of a hidden double life.
It really is. And the contrast, I mean, it's immediately apparent before you even read a single word.
Just looking at the physical book itself.
Right, exactly. Look at the cover of the book we are examining today. You're met with these magnificent glowing golden shrines and intricate minarets set against this deeply saturated, almost ethereal green and sky blue backdrop.
Yeah, the visual language just screams of ancient mysticism, deep reverence.
It really does. But then
Then you flip to the back cover, right? And the author's biography completely shatters that ancient illusion.
completely. Because we aren't looking at some historical mystic from a bygone era.
Right. We're looking at Dr. Urooj Akhtar Zaidi.
A very modern academic.
Yes, a modern academic who spent his final years in Windsor, Ontario. So the book is titled Bandagi-E-Buturab.
Which translates to Devotion to Abu Turab.
Right, it's a posthumously published collection of classical Urdu poetry. And, well, the mission for our deep dive today is to explore how those two seemingly opposite worlds collided.
The modern political science and the ancient spiritual devotion.
Exactly, how they collided in this one incredibly fascinating individual.
But, before we really delve into that collision, we should probably set some clear parameters for the listener.
Yeah, that's a good point, the neutrality disclaimer.
Right. So the poetry within Bandagi-E-Buturab is deeply steeped in themes that are central to the Shia Islamic tradition.
Right, the text is built on this profound reverence for the Al-Bayt.
Which is the family of the prophet.
Yes, and it expresses this deeply visceral historical grief surrounding the tragedy of Karbala.
So our goal here today is purely analytical and literary. We're exploring the author's passionate viewpoints just to understand the source material as a work of art, really.
And as a biography.
Exactly. We're observing the theology impartially. We aren't endorsing it or debating the religious history. We're just reporting on what's in the text.
Right, we're looking at the architecture of his devotion, so to speak.
Mm.
And as we explore his work, I actually want you, the listener, to consider your own life.
That's a great way to frame it.
Think about the professional face you wear every day.
Yeah.
The way your colleagues and your acquaintances define you, basically based on your resume.
The 9 to 5 you.
Right. Now think about your hidden passion. What is the thing you care about so profoundly that if your coworkers discovered it, it would completely rewrite their understanding of who you are?
For Dr. Zaidi, that hidden passion was, well, it was shaped by a life defined by massive migrations, both geographical and intellectual.
Yeah, the text outlines this really remarkable trajectory. I mean, he was born on February 15, 1942.
In Bijnor, India.
Right. And then from there, he migrated to his adopted homeland of Pakistan.
And then eventually made another massive leap across the world to Windsor, Ontario.
Which is such a wild shift in environment. And alongside those shifting borders, you have this incredibly rigorous academic journey.
Right, he held master's degrees in English and general arts.
And ultimately earned a PhD in political science. He spent a long career in teaching and education.
Which is fascinating because a political science PhD, I mean, that requires a brain trained to look at the world through a very empirical structural lens.
Yeah, it's the study of systems.
Yeah.
Temporal power dynamics, measurable outcomes.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
the jump from that, from the mechanics of the state to writing deeply emotional, spiritual Urdu poetry.
It feels totally jarring. Like, how does a mind trained to analyze government pivot to writing elegies about the soul?
Well, the connection actually runs much deeper than a simple pivot.
What do you mean?
Well, think about it. A political scientist spends their entire life studying governance, authority, and, the nature of justice versus tyranny.
Right.
When we look at the historical events Dr. Zaidi is writing about, specifically the tragedy of Karbala,
Where the prophet's grandson Hussein stood against the massive army of the Umayyad Caliphate.
exactly, we are essentially looking at what is fundamentally the ultimate political science case study.
Oh, wow. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, it's the ultimate case study of illegitimate power versus moral authority.
So he wasn't abandoning his academic field at all?
Not at all. He was applying it to the spiritual realm. The temporal politics of the modern world, they often end in compromise, right? Or failure.
Sure. Yeah.
But by writing this poetry, he's navigating a landscape where justice, even when it's violently suppressed in the physical world, achieves an absolute eternal victory.
That is so profound. And Windsor, Canada, I mean, it's a modern Western city built heavily on the automotive industry.
Very pragmatic, very temporal concerns.
Right. So it serves as this quiet, almost sterile incubator where he kept this fiery, ancient Eastern tradition alive.
And it's a tradition that barely made it into the public eye, actually.
Yeah, he passed away on March 8, 2021.
And the only reason we are even able to read this today is because of his children.
Right. Aliyah, Arshia, and Amr Urooj Zaidi. They lovingly compiled and published the book later that same year.
Which is beautiful. They essentially preserved the geography of their father's inner world.
Yeah, the act of publishing it acts as almost a secondary layer of devotion, you know?
Definitely. And when you read the text, you see that Dr. Zaidi was meticulously deliberate about how he constructed his own devotion.
Oh, yeah. He didn't just write these poems in a vacuum.
No, not at all. The introduction and the dedications, they're carefully engineered to anchor his modern work to the absolute giants of classical literature.
And history, too. The text is aggressively self-aware of its lineage.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, he explicitly dedicates this collection, which he calls a collection of praise for the Panjtan.
The Holy Five.
Right. He dedicates it to the soul of Mir Babar Ali Anis,
And he refers to Anis as the Kuda-i Sukan.
the god of poetry.
Right, the undisputed king of Urdu elegiac literature.
But he doesn't stop there. He also pulls in quotes from Justice Syed Amir Ali's famous historical book, The Spirit of Islam.
He drops in a legendary Persian quatrain by Sheikh Saadi about the Prophet's perfection.
Yeah, and he weaves in verses from Mirza Ghalib and Amir Khusro.
It's an incredible list.
He even includes a specific salam, a salutation poem, that he specifically notes was written in the land of Mirza Asadullah Khan Ghalib.
He is basically summoning a staggering assembly of literary heavyweights to just, stand in the margins of his own book.
But, okay, the skeptic in me has to wonder about the intent here.
How so?
Well, when an indie filmmaker makes their very first movie and they put a dedication to Hitchcock and Scorsese in the opening credits,
Right, yeah.
it sometimes feels like they're just borrowing credibility, right? Is Dr. Zaidi just name-dropping to make his poetry seem more important? Or is there, like, a functional reason for invoking these specific masters?
It's definitely functional. In the classical Eastern literary tradition, invoking these names functions as a set of instructions for the reader.
Instructions.
Yeah, it's not about ego at all. The Urdu elegiac tradition, specifically the forms of Marsiya and Salam, they have incredibly strict rules.
Like meter and vocabulary?
Exactly. Meter, vocabulary, and emotional cadence. And these forms were perfected in the 19th century by masters like Anis.
Oh, I see.
So by dedicating the work to Anis, Dr. Zaidi is signaling the specific emotional frequency he is broadcasting on.
So he's essentially telling the reader which instruments he's about to play.
Exactly. And more than that, he's borrowing their architectural frameworks. Because remember, he's a modern man in Canada experiencing this profound ancient grief and reverence.
Right.
To express that adequately, he needs a vessel strong enough to carry it without breaking.
That makes a lot of sense.
So he adopts the language and the rigorous standards of Anis and Ghalib to channel his own devotion. He's basically telling the reader, do not judge my work by modern casual standards.
Judge my devotion by the standards of the ancients.
Precisely.
And the scale of what he is trying to express with those ancient tools is absolutely massive. We really see this vividly in the Naats.
Which are the poems specifically dedicated to praising the prophet.
Yes, and the salams, the salutations. There is one specific, really beautiful metaphor translated from a Naat on page 11 that perfectly captures this struggle.
Ah, the metaphor regarding the impossibility of language.
Yes, so he's writing about praising the king of Batha, which is a title for the prophet.
Right.
And he writes that trying to capture this praise in a single poem is like confining a river into a small pot.
It's a gorgeous image.
The Urdu phrase is, Band ekuze minjeze koidaria karna.
It's a very profound concept in Eastern mysticism. It represents the tension between the finite human mind and infinite divine perfection.
But, let's look at this logically for a second from the perspective of his analytical academic background.
Okay, the political scientist perspective.
Yeah. If the subject of your devotion is this raging infinite river, right? And you know for a fact that you only hold a tiny clay pot.
Right.
Why even attempt to pour the water? From a purely empirical standpoint, isn't the endeavor of writing the poem mathematically guaranteed to fail?
Oh, the intellect absolutely knows it will fail. The political scientist in his brain knows the pot will overflow and break, because language itself is inherently inadequate.
So why do it?
Well, the paradox of this poetry is that the admission of failure is the actual triumph.
Wait, the failure is the goal.
Yeah. The attempt, knowing full well you will fail, is the ultimate expression of humility.
Oh, wow.
His spiritual reality compels him to speak. He's bringing his absolute best mastery of the Urdu language, offering it up, and simultaneously declaring, even my best is just a fraction of what you deserve.
That reframes the entire text for me.
Yeah.
Not a descriptive essay at all.
No, it's an offering at an altar.
And we see the intensity of that offering directed throughout the whole book.
Yeah.
Like a massive portion of the reverence is focused on Imam Ali.
Yes, and he uses titles that carry heavy philosophical weight.
Right. He calls him Abu Turab.
Meaning father of dust, which is a title emphasizing ultimate earthly humility before the divine.
He also frequently refers to him as the Mushkil Kusha, the solver of problems.
And the poetry also dedicates immense focus to Fatima Zahra, the daughter of the prophet.
Yeah. The text elevates her spiritual status, but at the same time, it grounds her in deeply specific historical griefs. Like, the author frequently references the issue of fadak.
Right, Fida.
For the listener who might not be, steeped in early Islamic history, what makes the mention of fadak so crucial to this poetry?
So Fadak was a highly valuable tract of agricultural land.
Okay.
And following the prophet's passing, a major historical and theological dispute arose over whether this land was the rightful inheritance of Fatima Zahra or if it belonged to the state. In the Shia tradition, the denial of Fadak to Fatima is viewed not just as a real estate dispute, but as the foundational usurpation of the rights of the prophet's family.
Which brings us right back to his political science background.
The overlap is completely undeniable. A political scientist studies property rights, inheritance laws, and, how state apparatuses can be used to marginalize political opponents.
Exactly.
So by weeping over Fadak in his poetry, Dr. Zaidi is mourning the precise moment he believes temporal politics corrupted divine justice.
Man, that is so layered. It's a meticulously constructed emotional landscape.
It really is.
And that landscape, it only gets more vivid when you look at the table of contents or the kitab.
The individual stanzas.
Yeah. The book functions almost like an atlas of sacred geography.
That's a great way to put it.
He directs his salams to the land of Najaf. He writes extensively about the plains of Karbala, the city of Kufa, and the banks of the Al-Qama River.
And he populates those geographical markers with these visceral, brutal sensory details of the tragedy of Karbala. Like, the poetry focuses relentlessly on the intense thirst in the scorching desert.
Yeah, the mention of the Al-Qama River is particularly devastating when you actually understand the context.
Because the Al-Qama was the nearby water source.
Exactly. It was the water source that the Umayyad army physically blocked Hussein's camp, including the women and young children, from accessing.
Right.
And again, looking at it through a structural lens, the denial of water is a calculated mechanism of cruelty. It's siege warfare.
Absolutely.
So the author uses the name of the river as this trigger for immense grief.
But the geography expands beyond the battlefield, too. The text details the aftermath of the massacre, focusing heavily on the role of Hussein's sister, Zainab, in the city of Damascus.
Yeah, Zainab's role in Damascus is another moment where the political and the spiritual just collide brilliantly.
It's such a powerful historical moment.
Because after surviving the massacre, she was taken as a captive to the court of the victorious caliph in Damascus.
Right.
And instead of submitting, she delivered this historically devastating sermon, completely dismantling his political legitimacy right in front of his own court.
She spoke absolute truth to absolute power.
Yes, and that act of defiance is the seed of Azadari.
Which is the continuous tradition of mourning Hussein.
Right, the very tradition that Dr. Zaidi is participating in through this book. When he writes about Najaf or Karbala or Damascus, he is relying on the specific mechanics of classical Urdu poetry to do it.
Yeah, the cadence, the rhythm, the repetition of these specific locations, they all act as emotional anchors.
It creates this really fascinating phenomenon of a split existence.
Yeah.
Like, think about the physical reality of Dr. Zaidi writing these verses.
Sitting in a modern Canadian home.
Right. The physical world around him is North American infrastructure, snow, academic papers.
The suburbs.
Yeah. Yet the moment he picks up his pen to write a salam, his soul is actively wandering the courtyard of a shrine in Najaf, or he's feeling the blistering heat at the sands of Karbala.
It's basically a dual citizenship of the soul.
Dual citizenship of the soul. I love that.
It perfectly captures the human capacity for deviation. I mean, grief and love create an internal map that completely ignores physical borders.
So true.
For Dr. Zaidi, those ancient deserts weren't just distant historical sites to be studied in a textbook. They were the primary residence of his spiritual identity.
Wow.
He paid his taxes and lived his daily life in Canada, but his spiritual tether was firmly anchored centuries in the past, in the sands of Iraq.
So when we pull all these threads together, the portrait of Dr. Urooj Akhtar Zaidi is incredibly profound.
It really is.
On the surface, the professional world saw a man who analyzed the empirical realities of modern governments and political systems.
A man who understood how power moves and how institutions function today.
Right. But beneath that academic exterior, his inner life was entirely dedicated to preserving a classical, highly structured poetic language.
He acted as a vessel for the profound spiritual grief of early Islamic history. He used his understanding of justice and power to elevate his mourning for the family of the Prophet.
It's like a secret garden of devotion that honestly might have remained walled off forever.
Yeah, if it weren't for his kids.
Exactly. The fact that his children recognized the value of this internal world and took the steps to publish it, it's a testament to the power of the legacy he left behind.
And the desire to document the true nature of our souls, it resonates far beyond any specific language or religious tradition.
Absolutely.
You may not share the author's theology, and you may not read classical Urdu, but the underlying drive is universally human. We all want to leave behind a record that basically says, beyond my job title, beyond where I happen to live, this is what moved my soul. This is what I truly loved.
It's the ultimate pursuit of permanence, which I guess brings us right back to where we started today.
The cover of the book.
Right. We discussed how the cover of a book, much like the surface of a person's life, rarely reveals the full depth of what lies inside.
So true.
Dr. Zaidi walked the streets of Canada, but his poetic heart clearly inhabited the deserts of Najaf and Karbala. It just makes you wonder about the secret landscapes we all carry within us.
Yeah.
So, for the listener, if someone were to find the hidden notebook of your life, if they were to read the poetry of who you truly are after you're gone, what distant land, what ancient cause, or what hidden passion would they discover you were secretly inhabiting all along?